How to stop your mind from racing at night. This is quite a big topic. So in today's video, we're really going to explore this raciness in the mind in relation to long-term sleep problems and insomnia, because that's really what I do in my practice and my client work on a daily basis. Raciness in the mind often leads to some version of sleep problems, whether or not that's not being able to fall asleep easily initially in the night, or once you wake up in the middle of the night, sometimes even several times, not being able to fall back to sleep easily again because of this raciness in the mind. That's really a common problem that I see in my practice on a daily basis, like I mentioned. So in today's video, I'm going to walk you through a couple of different things of how I practically approach this quite big topic. Whether or not this is more a racing mind where your mind jumps from one topic to the other and nothing is quite significantly maybe emotional, or you've got a lot of emotional around maybe frustrations, nervousness, and so on, as well as the raciness, or you might have problem-solving tendencies. So these are all quite different. And in the past, I've actually recorded different videos on these subtopics as well. So I'll link them below so you can really pick what is more relevant to the situation that you have. But this video today is going to give you a very good baseline of how you want to approach it in a very practical way so that you can really find the appropriate things so that you can really have that consistently positive outcome, rather than trying a lot of different things and giving you mixed results or no results at all. Now, before we go into the main content of the video, I wanted to welcome you back if you're part of my community already. Thank you so much for continuous support. If you are brand new, then let me quickly introduce myself. So my name is Beatrix Schmidt. I'm a sleep coach, a professional speaker, and the creator of the Sleep Skills for Life program, which is very much my way of helping clients to overcome their sleep problems that have been around for a long period of time through building practical skill sets so that they can work with themselves better and stop these sleep problems taking over their life. Now, today's video is very much something that I deal with on, like I said, a daily basis, this overactiveness in the mind in some way. And the reason it's actually quite close to my heart is because I used to struggle with the same thing when I struggled with my insomnia. I'm naturally a type of person, personality traits at all, that spends quite a big time in my head. It's just who I am. I'm a little bit more introverted. I often look at sort of pros and cons of situation, looking at sort of problem-solving tendencies. These are all very, very much part of who I am. So the very first step we want to take, and I would encourage you to do as well, is to really look at what are these tendencies, but without judgment or criticism. A lot of the times when clients come to me and really want to solve this issue of racing mind, there is quite a lot of frustration, judgment, criticism around what is happening. And I know it can be incredibly frustrating, but also we need to honor the fact that the role of the mind is to think. Raciness is not an abnormal part of that behavior of the mind. Analytical type thoughts are not a negative trait of the mind. It simply often just depends on who you are as a person. And it will link back to some of those things that are very big part of who you are. So the first thing I would suggest in this sort of situation where you really want to overcome this raciness of the mind is don't approach it with judgment or criticism. Now, I know it's easier said than done, but if it is really a core part of who you are, some of the raciness of the mind has its place. It might be a protective mechanism. It might be a way for you to maybe complete the work you do if you're more in sort of a problem-solving role in your job, or if you're, let's say, maybe studying still. That's a normal part of your everyday life. So when you take out the judgment and the criticism, you're actually just simply able to see these tendencies for what it is, which is part of who you are. So the first thing I would suggest you do with this is Make some time during the day, but please do it further away from bedtime. You do not want to do this exercise anywhere near close to bedtime, because often what that means is your mind will tap into it and even think about it even more. So I would suggest early afternoon or even in the morning, maybe one day. You would want to sit down and you can take a notepad or a piece of paper. I would really suggest that you don't do this electronically, but you use some sort of a handwriting way, because it is a different way of doing something when we type versus write. And I want you to take a note of what are your tendencies when it comes to racing mind. So I'll give you a couple of different examples. Is your racing mind more simply just exploring different topics without emotions? So this is where your mind may be just simply exploring things and there is no intensity in the emotion itself that you experience during that time of racing mind. That might be one version. Another version is maybe that your tendency is to look at this what ifs. So what if this happens? What if that happens? So these are all sort of that tendency of exploring different versions, exploring different scenarios. Sometimes that what if turns into problem solving. So once you explore the different options, you would want to come to a solution. So that could be another additional type of trait that you see or tendency you see. Some people are more sort of more worry type person. So that might mean that a lot of the raciness in the mind is because you are concerned about something or you are uncertain about something, or perhaps a conversation didn't go the way that you wanted. Another way to look at these tendencies is, for example, whether or not your racing mind is more past oriented. So this is where you might revisit things and think about some of the maybe conversations you had, or maybe a mistake you might have made during the day. Again, everybody's different. Some of the tendencies can be more future oriented. So this is where, again, that what if starts to show up. Maybe you are planning for the future. Maybe there is this planning, problem solving element to it, but it is more future oriented rather than past oriented. So when you take that time to actually write down some of those tendencies you see in an honest but non-judgmental way, and that's very important, you're able to actually explore some of those changes you see. A lot of the times when clients come to me and say, well, I've got racing mind, it's too general in a way to even put something in place for it. Racing mind, depending on the tendencies, most of the time require different tools and techniques. So if you're more of a worry type person versus more of a problem solving type person, the tools and the techniques you need in order to actually decrease the raciness is going to be different. So this first step is a really important step, because otherwise you're more likely to find general articles, go to general tools and techniques, and that's where you might not see results. So this is where that mismatch shows up. The tendencies will help us to tailor the tool or technique that you might need. So that's the first step, is explore these. And often I would say explore it over days rather than do it once and then don't even think about it again. You want to explore how different days show up with different things. I see this in my practice. If, let's say, you are working in a certain role during the week, your tendencies of the racing mind topics or angles or sort of theories or themes will be different than perhaps the weekend. Sometimes you might actually see that your racing mind tends to be more during the week versus the weekend. So again, you're going to start seeing what those dynamics are. And this is the first thing I do with my clients as well. We explore how the racing mind shows up in different ways across, let's say, a week or 2 weeks. And please don't shortchange yourself from only doing this once. If you do it once, most of the time what you're going to be doing is you're going to be looking at incredibly generally, which means that it won't be practical enough for you to be able to apply tools and techniques depending on what your situation is. So that's the very first step. The second step here, and this is what I do with my clients as well, is to really look at which part of your sleep it is more likely to impact. So for example, if your racing mind shows up maybe initially in your night. So this is where it might stop you falling asleep easily. Again, whatever easily means to you. That's quite different than if it actually bothers you in the middle of the night and you're not able to fall back to sleep easily in the middle of the night. So that's the second step, is in relation to sleep, whether or not it's more falling asleep initially or the middle of the night, or sometimes there is a third version, which is you waking up too early in the morning and not being able to fall back to sleep again. That kind of belongs to the second version, but sometimes it can simply be a morning issue. That's going to help you to again start looking at what you might need to put in place to actually deal with the situation and break it down. Now, if you see more than one thing playing out, so let's say some nights you're not able to fall asleep easily, but some nights you also wake up in the middle of the night and you're not able to fall back to sleep easily again, now we actually have a more complex racing mind situation. Again, doesn't mean that you can't overcome it, but it just means that sometimes different tools are going to be required in order to solve all these sub issues that you might see. So once you establish which part of your sleep is either more impacted or mainly impacted, you're then in a position to actually really start looking for tools and techniques. The tools and the techniques that you are applying, first of all, have to be based on these sub-dynamics. Please don't expect a 5-minute meditation or maybe mindfulness practice to counter 6 hours, 2 hours, over an hour of racing mind, because it just isn't appropriate. Another thing that often people look for or put in place is this complete stopping the mind to think. What I see with people who have these tendencies of thinking, and I'm a very good example of that because I'm still a thinker type, even though I don't struggle with my sleep anymore because I learned tools and techniques. That basically means that lack of thinking is not the goal. If you are a thinker type, your mind is designed that way, your entire human being is designed that way. So stopping it completely is not what you want to achieve. What you want to achieve is tools and techniques that allow you to decrease the intensity of the raciness so that it doesn't bother you anymore, or it doesn't cause negative impact when it comes to, let's say, your sleep. My mind is still a racy type, but I know how to decrease the raciness, keep it low so that it doesn't cause me problems. And that is often the difference. Please don't expect to be able to control your mind in a way that it will not do any of it at all, never. Because I think that's where often people set themselves up to failure. Because the reality is that racing mind serves us in some places. Problem solving, exploring what ifs, concerns, worries serve our ability to be able to prevent something or actually plan for something. So the raciness doesn't have to mean that it's completely negative. And this takes us back to the very first thing I mentioned, where it's important not to judge it or criticize it very harshly. It's got its place. It allows us to explore different things in our life in different ways. That is very much the purpose of the mind, is to explore and prevent some of the more negative experiences to happen again. So what you want to really look at in terms of the tools and techniques is how can you decrease intensity proactively and practically. So again, I'll give you my example. If I have had a busy day and I'm coming up to my evening and let's say maybe an hour away from bedtime, if I have racing mind, then I know it's because I spent a lot of time filling my mind with a lot of different things. That's not a bad thing. What's most important is to really work at decreasing that intensity that I'm feeling. And so one way to do that is to really look at some sort of a journaling practice. But please don't go with a very general, forceful practice of, let's say, maybe a gratitude list. If you're frustrated, busy, you've got a problem going on and you're forcing gratefulness, it's mismatched. What's more important in, let's say, for example, a journaling practice is to honor where you are at rather than push away and ignore what is happening. So again, that's quite common that I see in my practice, where people just want to either distract themselves from what is actually showing up or push it away and not actually allow that to be dissolved and decreased. I hope that this way of explaining helps you figure out what might be going wrong. Lack of thoughts is often not the end result for thinker types. Controlling your thoughts is not often the end result for someone who is a thinker type. It's working with your mind so that you are more in balance, so you know how to bring the intensity down, how to bring your mind to be at a what we might call peaceful place. And that does not mean absence of thought. It means that your mind is calmer and it's actually balanced out, whether that's positive, negative, wired, busy, or problem-solving type tendencies. It's actually calmed down. So that's really the last step. Whatever tool or technique you are applying is a practical way of decreasing that intensity. And I use different ways in my practice depending on the person. So I'm not going to give you sort of a 5-step to or a 5 secrets to, because there is no such thing as I mentioned earlier. It's very much about fine-tuning a practice that either already shows some positive influence, and often this is where I ask my clients, what tends to help that raciness to decrease? And then we work with that. So look at that in your life as well. If something's already working to decrease that raciness, then what I would suggest is look at how you can make that practice bigger, better, more consistent, and more practical. So if we take the mindfulness example here, if you have a 5 or 10 minutes mindfulness practice, but you only do it once a week and you only do it on the days when your already racing mind is really, really racy, then you've not actually been able to prevent enough of the raciness already. So that's where you got to be very honest with yourself about how you're applying the tools that might be helpful for you. So I hope that this video and these steps have helped you to start approaching this big topic of racing mind in a simpler and more practical way. This is, like I said, just one part of my work. When I look at racing mind, I really look at what is the situation, what is helping or preventing the person to improve the situation, and then put the appropriate things in place. So that's what's more important. There is no such thing as something that will work in 5 minutes forever and ever if your racing mind is quite a big chunk of your daytime or your evening or your nighttime. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you haven't yet and you like this video, hit that little bell below. You can hit that subscribe button as well so I can keep you updated when I post new videos, and that little bell will also help us to be able to let you know when that happens. Other than that, keep exploring this big topic of racing mind. There is always something that will work for you, but it's coming from this very practical way of looking at it. And of course, if you're not sure where to go with it, you're very welcome to reach out to me. This is what I do mostly in my practice. I work with thinker types most of the time, and we really look at retraining the mind so that it's not racing and stopping you to be able to either fall asleep initially or sleep through the night without these disturbances.